Early sobriety was not easy for me. I had a really angry wife, and she should have been angry. And I told David that, right? I called him at 3 weeks sober, and I said, "You're not going to believe this, David." And he said, "Try me." And I said, "I'm 3 weeks sober, and my wife is still mad at me." And he said, 3 weeks is a long time for any drunk to stay sober. But here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't know if she deserves a better husband or not. I would say she probably does, but that's not my call. But here's what I'm telling you. If you will work the steps and do what I'm asking you to do, which is just out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in my experience, if you will do that, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and you're going to be okay.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA. Deep in the heart of Texas, that was the voice of Mr. Jeff E. that you heard at the beginning of this here episode, and you are going to hear so much more from Jeff E. in just a moment. But first things first, this episode is made possible by Anonymous, Susan, Audrey, and Mike. And so you ask yourself, what exactly did Anonymous, Susan, Audrey, and Mike do? Well, they swung by our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com, maintained by the lovely Mrs. M. And they found the donation tab on that homepage, maybe somewhere else. I don't know. They found it somewhere on the website. I don't really know where it is, to tell you the truth. But anyway, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Anonymous, Susan, Audrey, and Mike. This here episode number 436, is coming right out to you'ns. Glad to have you here, ladies and germs. Ladies and germs. I don't know if y'all remember that guy. Oh God, what's his name? I think it was Henny Youngman. Do I remember that right? An old vaudeville guy. He was hilarious. He had tons of one-liners, and I'm trying to remember them on the fly right here. He would come out and he would say stuff like, how was this? If I can remember this right, he'd say, I went to the doctor. I said, "Doctor, I'm sick." Doc says, "You ever had that before?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you got it again." Just stuff like that. He would call ladies and germs. And what was another one he did? He says, I went to the doctor. I told my doctor I broke my leg in 2 places. He told me, "Stop going to those places." Just stuff like that. He said, "I once wanted to become an atheist, but I gave up. They have no holidays." So anyway, Henny Youngman, I'm just remembering, I think he played a little violin or something, if I'm not mistaken. He was absolutely out of this world. Rest in peace, Mr. Henny Youngman. But nonetheless, I think he had some jokes about alcohol and all kinds of jokes about his wife and stuff like that. But I digress. Y'all aren't here to hear Henny Youngman one-liners, I do not believe. You are here to hear from and about our guest, our featured guest of the week, I may add. His name is Jeff E. He is from the Tri-Cities, he is from the Bedford Bar Street Group. Yes, you caught that right. Bar Street Group. And we recorded this at the Tri-Cities event here that we have in North Texas. Jeff, our friend, is originally from Wichita Falls, Texas. I used to live there for a short period of time, for what it's worth. And he went to school at Texas A&M here in the Texas area. Those of you internationally may not know what that is, but most people here in the United States will have heard of that institution. So Jeff discusses a lot. He talks about how he wanted to be a good husband, father, and provider, but just could not pull it off. What it was like when he realized he had, quote, cross the line, unquote. His second drug of choice, which was anger, which I found that very interesting. His second drug of choice being anger. His last day of drinking and what that looked like. Big shotism, which is right out of the 12 and 12. How his wife intercepted the text that she was not supposed to see and everything that came from that. How the miracle comes from the work that we don't want to do. I like that. The miracle comes from the work that we don't want to do. The events that came to pass for him at 5 years sober, the keys to the kingdom, and much, much more. Ladies and germs, I present to you, without further ado, the one and only Mr. Jeff E. And we will have plenty, listener feedback at the end of this episode. Enjoy, Jeff E.
Hey guys, my name is Jeff Elmore and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July 10th of 2016, and for that I'm grateful. My first meeting was July 13th, 2016. David tried to get me to a meeting a couple of days before, but the dam had not burst yet. I was still covering all the holes in the dam, and it burst on July 13th, 2016. It was the absolute worst day of my life. And I went to the Frisco meeting. David met me out there at the Frisco meeting. And y'all went around the room and shared your experience, strength, and hope. So, this is not my favorite thing to do, but man, I felt like I owed y'all. I really owed y'all because y'all were there for me. Y'all were there for me. So, and God spoke through y'all. I have a sponsor, David. He's in the audience. I have a grand sponsor who's not here. And the best thing about having a sponsor and a grand sponsor is they know that they sponsor me. If David's out of town, Mike gets called. And Mike, there was a couple of times over the last couple of months that David was out of town and I had some problems, and I worked a 10th step with Mike. And that's what sponsorship's for. My home group is Bedford Bar Street. We have a meeting every night at 7. I also go to another group called Language of the Heart in Colleyville, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. The 9 a.m.s don't tend to distract the wife quite as much as the 7 p.m.s do. So I go to the 9s as well. So before I start, I like to say a couple of things. One is, when I got into AA, why did I get into AA? I have, obviously a cousin who's in the program. His last drink was with me on January 1st, 1998. I did not get sober when he did. But it's a little bit of foreshadowing there, I think, that, his last drink was with me. He describes it as we were in the back of a Toyota Camry drinking hot Miller Lite, I think. I don't really remember. But we were going to a Texas A&M football game, and he left, went back to Austin, and I kept trudging. And here's the deal. I didn't know anything about AA. I didn't know that I didn't know what the 12 steps were. I didn't know what y'all did here. I'd seen it on The Sopranos. I had seen it on Breaking Bad. I think that was NA, but I'd seen it on Breaking Bad. And that's about all I knew, except that David went to AA. So the worst day of my life, right? my wife told me 100th time, she said, just please slow down on your drinking. Please slow down on your drinking. And I would say, yep, you're right. You're right. She said, you're ruining our family. You're ruining our fun. You got to slow down. And so I would slow down for as long as the heat would get off my back. And on July 10th, 2016, I looked at her and I said, I can't. And she said, you better call your cousin David. And I did. And he told me there was a way out. And I was born in Wichita Falls, Texas, which qualifies me for the program. It's not a lot to do in Wichita Falls. I went to high school there. I was I was in a couple of different groups. I was in a band, had long hair, played in a rock band. I was also in all the lead and masterwork classes, and I was on the tennis team. And I didn't really feel like I fit into any of them. I didn't really fit in with the tennis team because it was a football school, and I had long hair and played in a rock band. I didn't really fit with the rockers because I played on the tennis team, and I really didn't fit in with the smart guys. They were a lot smarter than I was. And not only that, I had long hair and played on the tennis team. So I didn't really feel like I fit in, right? My insides always tried to match your outsides. And the first time I heard that, I was like, God, that's me. My insides never matched your outsides, but I could take that drink. I could pop that Miller Lite and take the drink, and just nice and easy. And I would get that sense of ease and comfort. I didn't have a lot of repercussions from alcohol. I ended up graduating from high school with good grades, ended up going to Texas A&M, quickly learned that if I'll take Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday classes, I can party Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night, and I could stop. Right? Sunday, I'm stopped. I'm focused. My dad told me one time, he said, you have to know when to party and when to work. And I did at that point. It was fun. It became fun with problems, and then it became just problems, right? But back at A&M, it was just fun. It was fun. Not a whole lot of problems. I ended up graduating with a degree, had good grades, met my wife not too long after that at a bar. That's where 11 months later we were married, right? Got alcoholically married really quick. And here's the deal. I knew I had taken some upper level courses at A&M, and they had kicked my ass, right? So I knew who I was. I wasn't going to save the world, right? I had a sponsee one time say he wanted to change the world. And I don't think that's our deal in AA, right? We're supposed to change our world, not the world. And so I knew who I was coming out of A&M, and I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, which has served me well here. There's a whole lot of smart people in here, right? But I got out, and all I wanted to be was a good husband, right? I wanted to be a good father when we had kids, a good husband, and a good provider. We had kids 5 and 8 years later. So, and that's all I wanted to be, right? It's a good provider, good husband, good father. And that's what alcohol took away from me. I'm going to tell a couple of stories to identify, and also they're interrelated. The first one is my wife was an events coordinator at Club Corp. So she was a superstar up there. She did a lot up there, and she was the number one salesman up there, and she decided to retire. So they were having a retirement party for her. But they had it on a Sunday, and the Cowboys play on Sundays, right? And I have season tickets. The retirement party was 7 p.m. The game started at 3. She said, just go to the game, come back about 6:30, and we'll leave from the house. So I had every intention of doing that. And somewhere the game got good, I took a drink, and the allergy kicked in. I don't remember how many I had, but I remember talking to her at some point about 7:30, and she said, don't worry about coming to my retirement party. It's not that big a deal. Just be sure to take the babysitter home. And I'd forgot the babysitter was 15. So I got home not really being able to walk. I don't know how many I had, but I put my 2-year-old and the 5-year-old in the back seat of the car, in their car seat, and put the 15-year-old in the car as well, and drove her 5 miles down the road, dropped her off, and then drove all the way back. And one of the reasons I tell that story is I've never had a DWI, and it's not for lack of trying. And I've never had a felony or been to jail, but it's not for lack of trying. I could have as many DWIs as anybody in the room. There wasn't very many days where I didn't drink and drive. I just never got caught. Another reason I tell this story is because I put somebody else's kid in danger, and I could not see my part in that. The second story I tell is where I crossed the line. A lot of people don't know where they crossed the line. I know exactly where I crossed the line. It was 6 years before I got sober. My sister is one of us. She'd gone to Valley Hope. I didn't really understand alcoholism or addiction at that point, but she'd gone to Valley Hope, and so I thought, well, she's cured, right? She's been to rehab, she's cured. So she wanted, at that point, my nephew was about 2 years old, and my daughter, I think, was 6, and she wanted to keep my daughter for a night, and my daughter loves my sister, so we let her stay over there for the night, and Ashley and I ended up going out and having a good night and getting back home about 11, and Ashley went to sleep, and I went on the back patio and drank. At that point I was probably drinking 2-3 times a week, somewhere around there, maybe 4, but it wasn't continuous yet. The problem with my daughter being with my sister is she took some pills and then drank behind it and passed out. And at some point, Gavin, my nephew, and my daughter woke up, and they thought my sister was dead. And they couldn't get her up. And my daughter didn't have my phone number. So she had my wife's phone number, but my wife's asleep. So in the morning I wake up and I'm getting in the shower, and my wife comes and hands me the phone, and I get to listen to about 6 messages from a 6-year-old that's just terrified. She's terrified. I think Aunt Jenny's dead. I need some help. Please help me, Dad. Please come help me. It was heartbreaking, right? And they progressively got worse. That day I actually spent with Jen and Dave. We went out to a A&M game. And I remember talking to Dave about it, and he told me how to react, right? With patience, kindness, love, tolerance. Expectations should be really low for her, and your boundaries should be really high. But I was not in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's talking program to me. And I had every intention of doing that, right? I had every intention of going into that house and talking to her that night and being patient and kind and loving and tolerant. And then she opened the door. I heard a guy at Crest Butte say, he didn't have a second drug of choice, and that was me, right? I never did anything but alcohol. I never did puffs, powders, or pills, none of that, just alcohol. But his second drug of choice was anger. And that hit home, because my second drug of choice is anger, and I got angry, and it never got physical. It was very verbal, but it was I verbally assaulted her and told her what all she had done to me. I can see her part in this, right? But I couldn't see my part in that other story I just told. So I get back home, and I'm trying to call my mom and let her know what her daughter has done to my daughter and her nephew and my nephew. And she's not answering. So that means Jennifer got a hold of her first. So I get home and I get a call, and it's from my dad, and he said, "I hear we've had a bad night." And I said, "Dad, we've had a couple of bad nights." And he said, "You need to take it easy on your sister." And my jaw dropped. I was expecting him to be on my side, and I said, "I'm hanging up the phone." And I hung up the phone, and I threw it, and went over to the whiskey cabinet and drank for oblivion. From that point on, it was almost every day. There might have been some days when I didn't, and I tried to regulate, and I tried other things, but it was almost every day from that point on. And from that point on, what my life looked like was I would pass out on the patio at 2:30 in the morning, right? I'd make it to the bed, but that was about it. Watching Game of Thrones reruns on the back patio by myself, 2:30 in the morning. I would wake up at 6:30 to get the kids ready for school. I'd still be half drunk. My wife would be tired because she's worried about me. One of the kids would say something to her, and of course I have to defend her honor. So, I'd yell at one of the kids. I would drunkenly drive, half drunk, still take the kids to school. Many times, one or both of my kids would walk into school crying because of how I berated them. I then would get back. I own my own business, so I can't fire myself. It wasn't far from firing myself, but I mean, it was almost there, but I can't fire myself. So I'd sleep it off, wake up 10:30 in the morning, go in the shower, and I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to drink again. I would get to work, have a greasy Whataburger or something, start feeling a little better, and think, well, that's a little bit of an overreaction, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have one tonight. And so I would get home, hang out with the kids for a while. About 8:30, Ashley would say, hey, do you want a drink? Do you want one drink? And I would go, I want one drink. And I would drink it and the allergy would kick in and there was nothing I could do. And that was the last 6 years of my drinking. My last day of drinking was just like that. I had every intention of getting up and getting to work early. And, the world doesn't judge me on my intentions. They judge me on my actions. And I passed out late and got up late. I ended up taking my son to his basketball game and got home about 2. So I thought, well, I'll go to work now. So I get to work maybe about 3 or something, and we close at 5:30. So there's not much going on. So I decide, you know what? I'm going to go to the bar. That sounds like a good decision. So I go to the bar, have a couple of beers. Ashley calls me and says, hey, we're going out with some friends tonight. Why don't you go home and get ready and I'll be home by 7:30 or something. So I knew I had 2 hours by myself to drink like I wanted without her on my back. So I got back on the back patio, started watching Game of Thrones, hitting the vodka, and I heard her come in, ran into the shower real quick, got ready, got out of the way before she knew what was happening. And she got in there and I knew I had another 30 or 45 minutes to keep doing what I was wanting to do. And that's what I did. I drank another 30 minutes, and by the time she got out and was ready, I was hammered. And I'm sure she was like, how did this fool get this drunk this quick? But I was. And she drove to a little place there in Colleyville. We met all our friends there. There was probably 4 couples there. And I was that guy at the table that couldn't talk. I was too drunk to talk, right, at 7:30 at night, whatever it was. So I ended up having to play the big shot, buying everybody's, even though I don't have any money, right? Even though my credit cards are maxed out, I'm having to buy everybody's meal because I'm the big shot. We ended up going to some people's house later that night, and I was the guy that's too drunk to be on the back patio, right? I'm inside. My wife is pretty responsible, so she's had a couple of glasses of wine, 3 glasses of wine, so she decides not to drive. So we get in one of my friend's cars, and she intercepts a text from somebody that I should not have been texting. All I wanted to be was a good father and a good husband. And now I can look and I'm neither, right? I am neither. And so World War III ensues, man. And it's a tough night. And I don't remember a lot from it. I just remember the yelling and just how shocked she was. And, they put me in the back bedroom. I remember dreaming and just hoping it was just a bad dream. Just please let it be a bad dream. And then I kind of came to in the morning and she threw my phone at me. So I knew it wasn't a dream, right? So I had that talk with her, right? And she said, listen, you're ruining our fun. You're ruining our family. You need to do something about it. You need to slow down. And I said, I can't. And she said, call David. And I got into the bathroom and I remember just looking at myself and I had that newcomer look, right? That gray and red look, right? I just looked horrible. And I had this hole right here. I could feel it. A lot of people talk about it in their gut, but it was right here for me and I could feel it. And I didn't know what to do, so I called David, and he told me there was a Shivering Denizens meeting on Monday night he'd like me to go to, but again, the dam hadn't burst quite yet. So there's a Frisco meeting, men's meeting that's I think he said there's a good bunch of dudes, and that's been my experience. And he said 7:30 on Wednesday night if you can make it. So I ended up getting kicked out of the house on that Wednesday, and I was out of options. If I'd had any other options, I wouldn't have been there. But I was out of options. So I drove all the way to Frisco. David met me outside. and said, have you ever been to an AA meeting? And I said, I haven't. He said, okay, here's what's going to happen. He said, they're going to offer a desire chip. It's a 24-hour desire chip. It's just a desire to stay sober for 24 hours. No more, no less. I don't care what you do. I'm like, okay. And he said, then we're going to go around the room and we're going to introduce ourselves. Here's what I say. I say, my name's David and my sobriety date's January 1st, 1998. I don't care what you say. I'm like, it's okay. And then they're going to go around the room and they're going to tell their stories. And they're going to share their experience, strength, and hope. Listen for the similarities, not the differences. So we got to the meeting. Alex was chairing. He offered a desire chip, and I took it. And they started saying their names and their sobriety dates, and David was sitting by me, and all I had to do was change the first name and the sobriety date, right? My name's Jeff Elmore, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's July 10th, 2016. And by saying I was an alcoholic, I felt this wave of relief just come off me. And then they went all around the room and told their stories. And I don't remember anybody's story that night except for one dude. He sat in the back and he had long hair and he had a Harley vest on, and he told my story. He was just further down the road than me. He spoke a lot of anger, and I could recognize anger. And he was 2 years sober, and I thought if he could do it, I can do it. So after the meeting, went outside, and David said, if you want to succeed, you need to do a couple of things. And I said, okay, what do I need to do? And he said, you need to buy a book. They were $10 at the time. I still had $10 left, so I bought a book. He said, this book has kept more people sober. It's changed more people's lives than anything before or after. He said, you need to get a sponsor. So I asked him to sponsor me, right? He said, okay, these are no longer suggestions. 90 meetings in 90 days. And, I don't think he understood what I was going through, right? I had all these things going on over here. And I told him, I said, 90 meetings in 90 days, that sounds like a little bit of an overreach. That's 90 hours, David. And he said, you're really good at math, aren't you? He goes, how much were you drinking? And I was like, ooh. So we ballparked it at 6 to 8 hours a day. And he said, look at all the time you're saving. Look at all the time you're saving. And then he said, I want you in the morning to get on your knees and say, God, please help keep me sober. And at night, if you've stayed sober, thank you for keeping me sober. And also about the meetings, he said, the fellowship can keep you sober till the faith hits. And that was my experience, is the fellowship at Bar Street and Language of the Heart kept me sober, and Frisco, until the faith hit. The faith did not come easy for me. So then he said, the prayer, and then at some point we're going to read the book and you're going to start working the steps. So he, that night, wanted me to read the doctor's opinion. And I read the doctor's opinion, and I couldn't believe some dude from 1935 had written it about me, right? I could see the allergy. I could see where the allergy kicked in. I could go back and I could look at it when I was at A&M or even in high school. I could see where the allergy had kicked in. It wasn't as bad as it was at the end, but at the end I could really see it. And I could see that obsession of the mind, how it was going to be different. I remember racing to the liquor store. I wasn't going to drink. I wasn't going to drink. I wasn't going to drink. And then at 8:50, 8:52, it would start getting tight, and I would race to Hall's Liquor, get the liquor bottle right under the wire. And I remember that. And I remembered that crazy obsession of the mind. Early sobriety was not easy for me. I had a really angry wife, and she should have been angry. And I told David that, right? I called him at 3 weeks sober, and I said, you're not going to believe this, David. And he said, try me. And I said, I'm 3 weeks sober and my wife is still mad at me. And he said, 3 weeks is a long time for any drunk to stay sober, but here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't know if she deserves a better husband or not. I would say she probably does, but that's not my call. But here's what I'm telling you. If you will work the steps and do what I'm asking you to do, which is just out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in my experience, if you will do that, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and you're going to be okay. How is all this pile of stuff over here going to get fixed? I don't know. Work the steps and let's see, is what he was saying. And I don't know how many times I've used that story with newcomers is, listen, you've got a lot going on. You can try to control it and burn the house down again, or you can work the steps and let God fix it. Right. And at some point, I started letting God fix it. It took a while though. I heard a quote in a meeting or somewhere at one point that said, the miracles you seek come from the work you avoid. And that was the first 6 months of my sobriety. I did not want to do step 4. I wasn't really scared about step 5. I didn't want to look at myself. And what I saw happen was there was 2 guys in our group, Mark and another guy named Jake at the other group. And they got in a little bit after me, but they worked step 4 and step 5, and I saw the relief they had. And I didn't have any relief. The first 6, the desire to drink was taken away really early. The desire to act right came later. So, the first 6 months of my sobriety, I was about to implode. All I'm doing is getting relief from meetings, but the steps bring freedom, right? I'm getting the relief at meetings, but I can shut my brain down for 1 hour, but that's about it. And my wife and I reconciled at some point. We were going on a cruise. I had won this charity auction cruise, and I had won it from a gaming company had donated the cruise. So I had this card, and I could go down in the casino of the cruise and get all the free drinks I wanted. And all the cruises I'd been on, and we'd been on 6 or 7 cruises, my liquor bill was always more than my cruise bill. So I'm on my way to Galveston. David's like, I don't know how much longer you're going to last. You're about to implode. I don't know how much longer you're going to make it. So I got on the ship and found a Friends of Bill meeting. And I went to 4 meetings there. There was this guy named Greg and his wife, and I haven't seen Greg after. And we talked a lot about step 4. And the cool thing about the program is this, in the second chat, or the We Agnostics, it says, God does not offer too hard of terms to those who seek him. And I got up on the top of that cruise outside and started writing. And every time I would write something about my sister or my dad or, whoever, I would feel this wave of relief, right? And I couldn't even see my part in a lot of it, but I would get this wave of relief when I was writing, and it felt good. And I was the guy that told my sponsor I didn't have any resentments. I didn't have any resentments. I'm just a nice, easygoing guy. And what ended up happening was, and I didn't do step 4 perfectly. So if you're new, follow your sponsor, but I didn't do it. I more journaled it than just doing the 4 columns and ballparking it, but I journaled it. And the guy that didn't have resentments wrote over 100 pages. And after I wrote that, I just felt like I got to get this out, right? And I wanted to get it out before I picked up my year chip at Bar Street. So David and I met, and I got it out, and things started changing, right? I started acting differently. I had a girl that worked for me for about 4 years before, or 5 years before I got in the program, and about 5 years after. And I own a pawn shop, and it's not always the easiest environment. And she had seen me react to customers that treated me poorly. And this guy came in after I'd done my 5th step, and he started yelling at me over something I had said, or something that I offered him. I offered him less money than he thought something should be offered. And he told me to go F myself. And I looked at him and I said, God bless you. And I turned around and walked away. And he goes screaming out the door, right? Chirping the whole time. And I just said, God bless you, and walked away. And she looked at me and she said, what was that? I go, I have no idea. I guess the program's working. And she said, I guess it is, right? Before I picked up my year chip, the year that the month that I got sober was July, and usually I would take the nieces and the nephew and my daughter and my son to Crested Butte with my wife, and I screwed it up because we always did it in July, and my sobriety date's July 10th. So I really felt bad about that. So This next year in July, we had scheduled it with the mountain conference. So we were going to take the nieces. I was going to take my 3 nieces, my nephew, my daughter, and 2 dogs to Crested Butte. And we normally left about 4 in the morning. And that way, it's quiet until at least Amarillo. It gets pretty hectic with 5 kids in the car after that, but it's quiet until Amarillo. So my wife calls me the day before we're going to leave, right? And she says, "Hey," and she's running a charity, right? And she's looking for the event and where to hold the event. And she said, "The preacher called about where I want to hold the event, and he wants me to go to their church tomorrow, and then afterwards talk about holding the event where he is." And I go, "Well, Ashley, that would mean we would get to Crested Butte on Monday sometime, and we'll have to stay in Dalhart, and I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to pay that extra money." And she said, "Well, I don't want you to either. What I want you to do is I want you to take your 3 nieces, your nephew, your daughter, and 2 dogs to Crested Butte by yourself, and you can pick me up on Monday." And at that point, I had a pause button, and I said, "We're getting busy. Hold on. Let me call you back." And I called David, and I said, "You're not going to believe what this woman is asking me to do." I said, "She wants me to drive my 3 nieces, my nephew, my daughter, and 2 dogs to Crested Butte by myself." And he goes, "How long a trip is that?" I said, "David, it's 12 and a half, 13 hours. And he said, "Can you believe, as big a drunk as you are, that anyone would allow you to drive your 3 nieces, your nephew, your daughter, let alone 2 dogs to Crested Butte by yourself?" And I couldn't, right? At that point, I got my perspective, right? I got that different perspective, and I got to see it really is unbelievable, right? And that's what good sponsorship does, is it gives me the different perspective. I picked up my chip at Bar Street. David and Jennifer were there. After the meeting, Jennifer pulled me aside and she said, "Look at the board." And so we're looking at the board, right? And she said, "What do you see?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you see, Jennifer?" And she said, "There you are at a year. There's another dude at a year. And there's a girl at 2 years, but there's nobody in between, right? 7, 8 years. Where do you think they all go?" And I go, I don't know." She said, "At some point we think we have it. And what I'm here to tell you is you don't have it." And thank God she said that, because I have not had easy sobriety. Life happens, but my wife did not forgive me for about the first 2.5 years. I had a whole lot of struggle with my son. My daughter's had a whole lot of issues. And at 5 years sober, I 3 things happened. One, and I'm going to talk about one of them in particular. My sister, who's one of us, ended up having a stroke. She had a drug-related stroke, and she had moved to Colorado to get away from the boyfriend that was here in town, and some other things. But she had moved to Colorado to get rid of that, and nobody knew the boy had followed her up there and was with him or with her. But and my nephew was up there with him. So they lived up there 3 years, kind of not knowing. Nobody knew what was going on. My parents didn't know what was going on. They were paying for everything, but they didn't know what was going on. And what had happened was the boy that followed her up there was doing some dry goods, selling some dry goods, and doing a whole lot of other things. And my nephew, between 8 and 11, was basically running the household up there. So, and he, I could tell when he would come in, he would be so happy to be here in Texas, and then when he would leave, you could just tell the air would just be sucked out of him. So, I probably should have seen something that was going on, but I didn't. But I got a call in November, and the call was from my mom, and I don't usually answer stuff like that at work. She knows I'm busy. She usually just leaves a message. So I see the call and I don't answer it. And then I see another call, and I just had this sinking feeling. It just hit that something horrible has happened. And I remember listening to Sandy Beach. If y'all haven't listened to him, you should listen to Sandy Beach. And he lost a daughter in recovery, and he had the same phone call, right? He could feel the phone call through the phone. And he said this prayer. He looked up at the sky and said, "God, I'm going to need your help through this. It's not going to affect my relationship with you, but I'm going to need your help through it. And then he answered the phone, and that's the way I did it. And then I answered the phone, and my sister had a stroke. My mom was worried sick. My dad was worried sick. So what we ended up doing was flying to Denver that night. And before we got to the hotel, somebody was dropping Gavin off to me, and we get this text, and it says, when he gives you Gavin, do not ever give him back again. So the boy that wasn't supposed to be there dropped Gavin off, and here we are. And the next day, we found out how Gavin had been living the last 3 years, and how my sister had been living, and how the boyfriend had been living. And what had happened was she'd had a drug-related stroke, and he had thought, well, if I take her to the hospital, I'm going to get in trouble. So he let her sit there for 6 hours. And now she can't move the left side of her body and lives in a home, and she's like a 4-year-old. So, but at this point, we don't know. She's in a coma. We don't know what's going to happen. And somehow he got medical power of attorney over her, so we can't even see her. So I call one of my friends that's a lawyer, and he said, what are your intentions? And I said, well, I can't give Gavin, Gavin's got nowhere to go, so I'm taking him. And he said, get him into to Texas. Residency starts the minute you set foot, and it takes 6 months. So, I used to hear a lot of you people in here, the older crowd anyway, say, my kids saw me screw a whole lot of things up, and my grandkids have never seen me drink. And I thought, well, that's nice. At some point, maybe my kids will figure out how to have grandkids, and I'll have a couple of grandkids, and they won't see me screw stuff up. Well, God had other plans, right? He gave me a nephew to raise. And, the shy kid, the anime kid that was real skinny, looking down at the ground all the time, he now plays on the football team, starting linebacker, JV, extremely confident, extremely popular, ripped. I mean, just good kid, right? Straight A's. He wasn't doing it. They were about to take him out of school in in Colorado because they knew what was going on. And we got there right before CPS did, which it was a miracle, because if CPS comes in, what happens is we have to fight through Colorado from Texas. So we got there right before CPS did, and got him back. And, that's a whole God thing, right? I know now one of the reasons God gave me the chance to get sober. Another thing that happened was, my daughter, she's had a whole lot of struggles. And when she was in high school, she was really struggling. I was telling her the same thing, right? I was trying not to sponsor her, but I was telling her, this is unsustainable, right? The way you're acting and the way you're doing is unsustainable, but she wouldn't listen to me. So there was a guy there that had a whole lot more money than me, and my daughter and his daughter got in a fight. It wasn't a fight. It was just verbal. It wasn't anything else, but she had sent something on Instagram, so he had proof. And he got her arrested, and he got her thrown in jail. And even the detective said, you know what, this isn't something we should be having to handle. But she got put in jail, and I talked to the sponsor about it, and repercussions aren't a bad thing. Everybody has a right to make their own decisions and to suffer the consequences of their own decisions, right? That's Chuck Chamberlain. And so I let her suffer. My wife and I got on the same page, and I let her suffer some consequences. And I'll be damned if there was a girl that wasn't on crack in jail that told her the same thing that I'd been telling her for the last 3 years, and she listened to her and not me. So she gets out, and she's failing out of Tarrant County, which is really hard to do. She's failing out of Tarrant County. She ends up turning it around, right? Getting some A's at Tarrant County, ends up going to Oklahoma State, where she's now a senior. Her life changed around. My best idea at that point was to go kick that guy's ass, right? I'm going to go kick his ass. He deserves it, and God's idea is, let's let her have some consequences, and let's let her go to Oklahoma State and get a degree. So, if my will over here is not the right thing, right? I have to do the pedaling and let God do the steering, right? I have to put the work in and give God the worry. And that's a whole lot of the program. I sponsor a lot of guys, and I think that's the coolest part of the program is watching the lights kick on. I was doing a fourth step with this guy. We had a meeting last week in outside of Corsicana. I can't remember, Elkhart. And we had a circuit speaker come in. I don't know, he was there and there was like 8 of us, right? But he talked about miracles, right? And so I was thinking, what are the miracles I've seen? And one of the miracles I was doing that fifth step with the guy, and he's one of the nicest guys you would ever meet. And you wouldn't think he's angry, right? But we're in this fifth step, and I always ask God, please help me be your eyes and ears. Please help be my mouthpiece. Put your words in my mouth. Help me say what needs to be said here, hear what needs to be heard. And we're going through this fifth step, and he's screaming and yelling about his fifth step was basically 2 people, and he's screaming and yelling about this one person. And I was stuck, right? I didn't know what to say. And I said, God, I'm going to need some help. And these words came in my head. Said, say this. And they were pretty controversial. And I said, nope. And here it comes again. You're my eyes, you're my ears, you're my mouthpiece. Say this. And I said, hold on a second. And he stopped, and I said it. And it looked like I'd slapped him across the face. And he said, I've never thought of that. I hadn't either, right? And I got to see where the melt began, right? I got to see where forgiveness started, and all I had to do was just keep doing these things, right? There's a guy at LOH that talks about faith, and it's about how God's gift to me is faith. It's not my gift to God. God's gift to me is faith. And if I do these things and keep doing these things, I get to see more and more and more, and my faith gets to keep growing. I was maybe 2 years sober, and there was a guy there that had lost his wife, and he was raising his kid by himself. And it reminded me of somebody in my life, but that person was not an alcoholic, and I couldn't help him, but I could help this guy. This guy's name was Patrick. And I'd met Patrick once or twice, and we texted back and forth some. And I was going to pick my daughter up in Watauga, and this voice came in my head. It said, call Patrick. I was like, what? I said, call Patrick. And I ended up texting him, and he immediately called me back, and he said, why did you just text me? And I go, I have no idea. I guess God told me to. And I go, what's going on? And he said, I'm out in front of the Kroger's here, and I don't know what to do. We don't have any food in the house, but I know if I go in, I'm going to get wine and beer, and I'm going to get drunk. So we got to talk all the way through it, and he got his food, got out. He called me at a year sober and said, I couldn't have done it without you, right? All I did was stay on the front lines, man. All I did was put the work in and stay on the front lines, and I get to see all these miracles, man. A couple more things. Before I stop, my one of the ways I got my business back was I started garage sailing. I'm pretty good at buying low and selling high. I had always wanted, or my wife had always wanted to go to this place called the Church on the Slab in Fort Worth. And I'm not a real religious guy, but before I got sober, Sundays were bad days, right? Because I was always hungover. So I never wanted to go to the Church on the Slab at that point. She kicked me out of the house, and all of a sudden I want to go to the Church on the Slab, right? Because I can spend 3 hours with my kids and my wife. And that's the only reason I went to the Church on the Slab, was to spend that 3 hours with my wife and kids. And I got there, and they throw me into the clothing room. The problem was there was no clothing, right? There's no jeans, couple of shirts, no hygiene kits, nothing. And this idea pops in my head, right? You can help. While you're garage sailing, you can buy jeans, you can buy shoes, you can buy shirts, you can buy all the things. While you're helping your business, you could help the Church on the Slab. So that's been a month. I do it once a month, and I've been doing that for 9 years now. And now you go into the clothing room, and it's stocked. It's stocked. And, that's one of the things I do, is I have to put myself below people. I have to, especially the homeless people. I used to consider the homeless people, I have a pawn shop and they come in and they don't have a lot of good stuff. And I used to put myself above them, and now I've got to put myself below them. And I do. And the funny thing is, they're helping me, right? I get there to help them and they help me every time. And I get to see faith. There was this lady that had this helmet on, and she'd had a brain injury, and she said a drunk driver had hit her, right? And she's telling her testimony, and she said, I want everybody to pray for him, and I just want to let everybody know that I've forgiven him. He had just hit her. She'd spent 30 days in the hospital, and she's forgiven him. And I thought, I don't know that I could do that at 30 days. It took me 3 years to forgive my dad, right? At 30 days, she's forgiving a drunk driver that hit her. I get to see those things. A couple of things. My favorite story in the book, and I know a lot of y'all like 417, but that's not my favorite. My favorite's Keys of the Kingdom. It was written by a girl out of Chicago, right? First lady with long-term sobriety. And the end of it has as much solution as any story in the book. AA is not a plan for recovery that can be finished and done with. It is a way of life, and the challenge contained in its principles is great enough to keep any human being striving for as long as he lives. We cannot outgrow this plan. As arrested alcoholics, we must have a program for living that allows for limitless expansion. Keeping one foot in front of the other is essential for maintaining our arrestment. Others may idle in a retrogressive groove without too much danger, but retrogression can spell death for us. However, this isn't as rough as it sounds, as we do become grateful for the necessity that makes us toe the line, and we find that we are compensated for a consistent effort by the countless dividends we receive. A complete change takes place in our approach to life. Where we used to run from responsibility, we find ourselves accepting it with gratitude that we can successfully shoulder it. Instead of wanting to escape some perplexing problem, we experience the thrill of challenge and the opportunity it affords for another application of the AA techniques, and we find ourselves tackling it with surprising vigor. There's no more aloneness with that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it. That ache is gone and never need return again. Now there's a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, we've been given the keys of the kingdom. And that has been my experience is, there are people that get life and there are people that don't get life, and I don't get life. I had to burn down the house to get to the 12 steps, and now I've got keys, right? I've got the keys of the kingdom. This last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read this letter. It was written by my daughter. She was 11 at the time, and I was 5 months sober, and it was before I worked a fourth step. And she could see something in me that I could not see in myself, right? And it says that in the book. Dad, you were a Christian that was filled with love and forgiveness, but then beer got in the way. And then vodka, and then even stronger whiskey. You stayed up really late every night drinking. You were more focused on drinking than God's grace. When I went to camp, you decided to become sober, and it was really hard. Then Dad and Mom made a decision to move into Mimi's house. That conversation where Dad told us that he was leaving, there were a lot of tears that afternoon and for the next couple of weeks. It never got any easier, no matter how many times Dad came over to visit. After 3.5 months, my dad moved back in and became a clean Christian dad, also became a God-filled, loving dad whose trust in God only increased by day and will never stop. He became a strong leader. He became a better father who has a lot of patience and is calm. My dad becoming sober was the best but hardest thing we've ever done as a family. I'm so proud of my dad for giving up alcohol for us. I love you, Daddy. Thank you for inviting me to share. I appreciate it.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Jeff E. I know that folks are going to get a lot out of your talk. We really appreciate you letting us record you and your talk at the Tri-Cities event. And anyway, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm at John, JOHN, at soberspeak.com, and I would love to hear from you. And so between doing the introduction and coming back here to record the listener feedback, I remembered another Henny Youngman joke that we had on the front of this episode. Say we, just me, my silliness. The other thing that he did with the doctor, he would go in and he says, I went to the doctor. And I said, hey, doc, it hurts when I do this. Doc says, don't do that anymore. So I loved that guy. He was just built for people like me, but nonetheless. All right, now on to a little bit of listener feedback. And Lori writes in, and Lori says FOTS handouts. That stands for Fellowship of the Spirit. And she says, "Hi, John, love your show. In the last episode, I think you mentioned we could email to find out how to get the Mark Houston Fellowship of the Spirit handout from the episode. Man, I love some AA and Mark Houston. Thanks for all you do, Lori." Well, as you know, Lori, I copied you on an email to Mr. Dave F., who has those handouts, and I'll let him give you access to those things. Thanks for writing in, Lori. Ian writes in, and Ian says, "Hey, John, I was recently released from prison here in Texas. And while I was there, I listened to over 150 of your podcast episodes. They helped me during the monotony of daily living in a place like that. So I really appreciate you and what you're doing. I wanted to get a request for the super secret Facebook group, if you don't mind. And he provided me his email, and I responded to him and told him how to get inside that super secret Facebook group. But Ian, thank you so much. Oh, things like this just absolutely make my day. I'm glad that I was able, me and the guests were able to provide a little release from your monotony while you were locked up. And thank you so much for writing in. For anybody else out there who wants to get in the super secret Facebook group, just log on to Facebook and search for, let me think about this, Sober Speak Secret Group. Ask for admission into the group, and we will get you on in there. Thanks for writing in. God bless you, my friend, and I hope our paths cross in person here one of these days soon, since you are in the Texas area. I know Texas is real big, but anyway, hope to see you soon. Angela writes in, and she says, "Thanks, John. I have been sober for almost 8 years. I listen to the podcast almost every day. Thank you for sharing the messages of hope and strength." Well, Angela, thank you for listening in. I really do appreciate it, and that's exactly why we started this thing. We wanted to share experience, strength, and hope, and we continue to do that. And thank you. And if people like you weren't out there listening, I mean, how do I put this? It just would not be worth it, right? I mean, it's because we have a community and we're able to share with each other and be with each other in spirit that makes this whole thing worth it. Thank you so much for writing in. Cindy writes in, and Cindy says, "Mark and Dave FOTS." She says, "Hi, John. I'm loving the part 1. Can't wait for more. Please keep them coming. Thank you. How do I get copies of the workbooks and worksheets they are referencing? Is this available for purchase? Thank you, John. I love your podcast. God bless you and God bless your podcast." Cindy S. Well, Cindy S., so good to hear from you as well. As you know, I copied you on an email with Dave F., and he has access to those workbooks, and he can get it over to you. Just in case you're a new listener or you don't know exactly what they're talking about here, I published an episode a few weeks back. It was Mark Houston and Dave F., Fellowship of the Spirit. It was part 1 of about, I can't remember, part 10. Of about 10 parts, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but they're saying, hey, we want the workbooks to go along with those, and how can we get them? And that's what folks are referencing. And then finally, one last one, Mallory writes in, and guess what the subject line is? Dave F. and Mark Houston. She says, "Hey, John, you asked what we thought about the first workshop episode. Is fantastic. Please post the rest. Thanks for everything you do, Mal." short for Mallory, I guess. Mal. So when you wear a dress or whatever you wear, is that called malwear? Get it? Like you're wearing. You see the malware, like kind of a take on words like MALWARE. You know what I'm talking about. You're just saying, just get on with it. I completely understand. If I was listening to this, I would want me to get on with it as well. All right. So if you made it this far, God bless you. You deserve a gold medal. Not for listening to our guest, Davey, but just her hanging in there with me through all this silliness and malarkey, as one of our politicians used to say, or maybe he still says it. I don't know. But anyway, all this malarkey. But all right, everybody, that right there is another episode of Sober Speak. I had to think of the name of my podcast. Sober Speak in the books. All right. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. I take this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week. May God bless you in abundance and keep you until then. I think that's it. Love you guys. Be well. Have a safe and sober week. If I see you next week. Bye. Well, I would want you to have this, even if I don't come back, I still would want you to have a safe and sober week. Anyway, I'll stop now. Bye-bye.